Welcome to Roll for Crit. Thank you so much for joining me because I'm being joined by an awesome game designer. Today, I'm going to be talking with Josh Derksen, who's designed tons of games, including Buffy the Vampire Slayer and Shadowrun Sprawl Ops. But he's also got a new cool game we're going to talk about as well. Thank you so much for coming on and joining the talk with me.
Hi, Will. Nice to be here. Yeah, we've done a lot of games at Lynnvander Studios. I would be remiss to take sole credit for all of them. It's largely a team effort.
Right.
We're a small game design studio. We're about 3 people. It's myself, Thomas Gofton, who is our sort of creative director, business manager, and Dylan Bertolo, who is our sort of lead designer. Sprawl Ops is actually his baby. I just did some of the work on the co-op for it.
You helped along with all these. I mean, that's what happens when you probably have such a small project. Or not small
group. And we also do a lot of work with other publishers, right? So we're a full service design studio. We do everything from initial concept all the way through to manufacturing files, depending on the scope of the project and what people need from us.
So why don't we start there? How did this group actually start? When did you decide that, all right, the 3 of us, we're totally going to go into the board game industry? This is definitely a smart move in that there'd be nothing that can bad that can happen.
Yeah, I don't know who said this. Is the famous line that the best way to make a small fortune in the board game industry is to start with a large fortune.
Yeah.
But so it's an interesting story in the sense that it doesn't actually begin with the 3 of us at the company. Lynnvander was actually started in 2014 by Thomas. He made Albion's Legacy on a dare from a friend, put it on Kickstarter with a couple of other people who were around him. I didn't join the company until 2016 when the game had already been fulfilled and existed. I was brought on as a graphic designer. We just had a ton of rapid growth from like 2016, 2017 through 2019. And a number of the people who were there at the start of the company are no longer there. It imploded all the way down to Tommy and I, and we kind of looked at each other like, we want to keep doing this, right? We've done some cool stuff. We should keep going. And then we were doing some late stage development on Shadowrun Sprawl Ops at the request of Catalyst Game Labs, the publisher, and we met Dylan that way, kind of formally in the game design sense. And at the time we were playtesting, we were up in their hotel room at, I think it was Gen Con in that year. And as a joke, Dylan put on my company like blazer with the crest on the back. And Tommy was sitting on a couch on the other side of the room and looked over and was just like, this isn't the worst idea. And we hired him like a month later. So it's been the 3 of us ever since. Now we're just all, full speed ahead.
For those who don't know, if you want to work in the board game industry, it all depends on how well you look in the company's merchandise.
Yeah, apparently. That's a really good litmus test for us, at least.
Now, if anyone goes to your Board Game Geek page, there are definitely a lot of games like Sprawl Ops that are based on existing properties. And I was curious, how do you feel about that? Not just because it wasn't just like you have TV, like Sprawl Ops is or Shadowrun, is a game in itself. How do you tackle those kinds of things, especially when you are transferring from different forms of media? Because, like, I'm sure it's one thing taking Shadowrun, which has game elements, because game, versus something like Cowboy Bebop or the Buffy game, where there's a show, and I'm sure also worrying about maybe some fans being like, well, Buffy should have like +5 stats because she lifted a boulder, which is equivalent to a few tons.
Yeah. So we have a fairly detailed process that we do as part of our kind of license project onboarding. I would say at this point, most of what we've published has been licensed properties, largely as work for hire for other publishers. But there are some that we're starting to get into, and we're also starting to publish some of our own designs as well, because after about 6 years of designing and pitching licensed projects for various publishers, you end up with a lot of other material, and you've got a binder full of them, and you look back through them and go, that was a really great concept. It wasn't a great fit for like that moment, but like we all really like that concept. We should do something with it. So we're starting to go back and sort of mine our own back catalog and start to publish some of those games. But it's unusual in the sense that a lot of times sometimes publishers come to us with a concept like, hey, when Riverhorse approached us to do Terminator Genesis, for example, the brief was literally just Zombicide with Terminators. Take that kind of idea. We want something that looks like that on the table. Take that and run with it. Show us what you can come up with. Other times it's, hey, we've got this license. We're thinking a box in roughly this size, this MSRP. No idea what that should be. Pitch us some ideas for what kind of game we can make with that license. Because of course, if you're a publisher and you've already paid your licensing minimums, you've just got this license. You should do as much with it as you can in the 3, 5, whatever years you've got it for, right? So that's often where a lot of our work comes in. Publishers have existing licenses. They want to expand their line. We come in and do something new and different that hasn't really been done with the license before, if we can. And that can be anything from pitches, design, playtesting, development, graphic design, manufacturing files. We've done projects where we've done all of those things. We've done projects where we've done some of those things. It really depends on what the ask is.
Now, I actually, before we were starting this interview, you pulled off some games. And I believe one of them goes along probably with a more, I think it's your own title. At least I don't recognize if it is a property.
Okay.
Do you want to show that, since it seems like a good segue?
Yeah. So this actually, we're going to have this for Gen Con actually in about a week. It's just hit retail. This is an original property that we've developed, which is a space racing, asteroid racing game. I'll hold that up to the camera there for you. But yeah, this is basically a pretty fast program movement navigational challenge for 2 to 6 players. It plays in like 45 to 60 minutes. It's very quick. It's got a lot of simultaneous play elements to it. You're doing a lot of the phases kind of all in the same time and then checking how it resolves afterwards. But yeah, that's a really cool little game that we've got coming out at Gen Con. The other one, actually, that the Gamefound for this wrapped pretty recently. This is Minotaur. This is a cooperative 8-bit dungeon crawl adventure with an ancient Greek theme. So that just finished Gamefound a couple months ago. It's in manufacturing now. We'll probably have it for sale later this year.
So I'm curious because you mentioned Gamefound. How are your thoughts? We can look at these two games, maybe your previous history of Kickstarter versus Gamefound, and even now Backer Kit. I believe their first project actually just released. So
yeah, the Dark Tower. Yeah, Minotaur was an interesting game for us because it's the first design that we have ever worked on where we signed an existing design from another designer. We actually didn't design that one in-house. It's made by Jared Garcia, who is I don't know if he's published anything else to date. Actually, this might be his first game. But we saw the game, we really liked it. We saw it had amazing thematic potential, which is something that across all of our IP games we do a lot of stuff, very heavy theme, right? Very thematic games. But we saw a lot of potential in it. And we also saw, because it's a smaller box game, it's MSRP is like $30 on it. It's a fairly small box. We just saw it as a good opportunity to see, like, hey, maybe we should try Gamefound, because we've done a lot of Kickstarters for a lot of our older games. And we've helped run a lot of Kickstarters for other publishers that take the designs we work on to Kickstarter. But it just seemed like a great opportunity to us to see how Gamefound was going to be different and or possibly just, exploring our options, right? I can confirm that Gamefound is a lot more tightly controlled than Kickstarter. They are very careful about not letting people launch projects on the same day as other people. They have kind of an internal schedule. I think it's still in beta, so there's a lot of kind of
they're still only a year or so. I don't think there's
it's unclear what they've said a few things about what their timeline's going to be. It's software development. I used to work in software. Who knows? It'll be ready when it's ready.
Yeah, I'm sure the code isn't making it easy.
Right. But yeah, it's just it's interesting to see where it's the same and where it's different.
Now, if I was a new game designer or anyone watching, would you suggest one over the other, or do you think it really depends on actually the kind of game you're designing?
I think at this point, I feel like Gamefound is maybe not quite ready for prime time if you're not an established designer. I feel like the caliber of projects that they are putting onto Gamefound are mostly from existing established publishers. And you don't get a lot of the browse traffic that you would get on Kickstarter, right? I don't think their audience is quite caught up yet there, and I don't think they have quite the same reach yet as the Kickstarter audience. Because like,
Yeah, I do when I do my news video, I look for projects to mention out, and I will say it's a lot easier for me to browse by like newest and Kickstarter and know what's actually funding versus what's
mhm.
not crowdfunding, a back in the backer kit phase.
Yeah, for
The
sure.
So that can definitely use, I'm sure, some more steps. So yeah, it makes sense if you don't already know, like, oh, I already know that the new Awakened Realms game is going on there. You're
Mhm.
gonna head there.
Yeah, I think also just from looking at the metrics from our previous Kickstarter campaigns, we got a lot of backers of people who just like, because it'll tell you where people find your Kickstarter page from and what that channel
Hmm.
is like. Um, we got a lot that are just Kickstarter discovery. Like someone was randomly browsing Kickstarter, discovered our game, thought that looks cool, I'll back it. Whereas GameFound, I feel like that didn't really happen. The
Hmm.
majority of like our pledges on GameFound were through advertising, through social media, through all that stuff. But I feel like as a platform to just find new creators, especially if you're just starting out and you don't have, $10,000, $20,000 to dump into marketing over the course of your campaign, you probably are going to get a lot more eyeballs on your game just from being on Kickstarter as a channel.
That makes sense. But there is, of course, the current elephant in the room, and I'm curious what your thoughts on this are. I've been talking too much news because I feel like it's the same thing, but a lot of companies are talking about how, because of all the shipping issues,
Hmm.
that they've had to ask again for money involving adding to like increasing prices or pay for the unexpected costs. What are your thoughts on this? Like, do you think this is something that's going to hamper the growth of a lot of Kickstarters, or is it just a bump in the road that you think game designers will be able to get through?
Honestly, I think the whatever the new price is that it should have been pledged at, funded at per backer is probably closer to trending towards the new normal,
Mm.
just because of having to pay for ocean freight, just because of having to do all that. I got a Kickstarter update from a project I backed recently that was something like, I think the Kickstarter was like $90 to back USD, and when it finally goes to retail, it'll be 150 or 155. That is a lot of money. So to a
Hmm.
difference, right?
Yeah.
That's a huge difference in estimation of, Kickstarter estimated cost back then. This was probably 2019 or 2020 versus now to actually manufacture, ship, fulfill all of that, because freight's gone up, because there's paper and cardboard shortages, because all of these other manufacturing and logistical problems, right? So it is challenging. And I think what we're most likely going to see is the days of super aggressively underpriced Kickstarter pledges just to kind of move backers in the door and onboard people to get enough hype
Hmm.
to then sell more units at retail with a better margin. I think those days are probably behind us.
All right. So definitely the huge savings might not be what we see more. So which I assume then
Yeah.
we might shift over either to like Kickstarter exclusives. I know is a one way, even
Yeah.
though not my favorite, but one way to get a lot of people interested during the Kickstarter phase, or maybe of course like put yourself in there. We might see more of like we're gonna have the goodies, I guess, rather than the
Mm.
discount.
I think that's likely. Yeah. That's probably what's going to happen for sure.
All right. And what do you think though? And do you think this will be something that's gonna obviously? Whenever I look at the I guess shipping charts, sometimes they tell you the pricing for each thing. Do you think this is
Hmm.
gonna be? We're gonna see much harder to maybe like this Kickstarter is only for people in Europe and America kind of thing. Like, do you think we might see something like that? Because I do notice pricing sometimes can be much worse depending on your location.
Um, so actually, we've got a project on Kickstarter right now, and this is something that we did sort of debate internally quite a bit with Snapship's tactics. But I would rather make the game available on Kickstarter with accurate shipping quotes, as accurate as we can get for the volume of the game based on all the quoting we've done, for people who are not in Central Europe and North America, right?
Hmm.
I would much rather find out what those quotes are, offer them, be transparent about the fact that, like, we need this many backers to get a pallet down there and actually make it cost effective for you. But these are the real costs, and I'm not going to say no. You can't get this game if you live in Australia. I'm
Hmm.
just going to say, well, we'll make it happen, but it won't be cheap, right?
Right.
And
That's
this is
fair.
always a challenge
Hmm.
with places like Australia. Freight there, I think, is famously extremely expensive because it's so far away.
I do know, I never thought about with board games, or at least I can't remember, but I do know it always comes up when I hear video games that like are you're like much higher than you'd expect. But why don't we actually go to something a bit more lighter with the game you just mentioned, Ship Tactics. This is it still? I
Yep.
can't. I didn't actually look at the date. Did it end yet?
So Snapship's Tactics actually ends later today.
Oh, wow.
About 4 p.m. Eastern.
As of this recording, not when I put up this video. I want to make
correct.
it clear.
I've actually got the Kickstarter page on the other monitor here, and I'm kind of watching it.
Do you have some potty preppers ready to pop as soon as the?
Yeah, a little bit. We're gonna live stream the last few hours of the campaign.
Oh, that's great.
Shortly, anyway. So after I'm done here.
Oh, perfect. Well, why don't you tell us about that game then?
So yeah, that's a project that's near and dear to me. If you've never heard of Snapships, it's a modular building toy. Someone described it to me as angry Lego. You build spaceships that are literally totally modular out of blocks. And what we've done, so this was developed by two gentlemen, Scott Peace and Jeff Swinty, along with a bunch of CAD designers and salespeople at Play Monster, as a toy line, and it launched in 2020. I saw it through a Facebook friend, thought it was kind of neat. I'm a huge Lego builder. Like, you can't see the rest of my shelves, but the other walls are like Lego. There's a whole bunch of Lego in this cabinet here behind me.
I actually want to mention that right before the interview, he's picking up your games that you helped, and it's in the same shelf of the Lego. So like, this is the I built this shelf.
Yeah, it is. It totally is. But yeah, so this is a game where we've got this amazing kind of modular building toy that I discovered. I made a few kits, or I bought a few kits, made a few custom ships with them, because I've done this for years with Lego. Posted them on Instagram and tagged the designers, the creators. They interviewed me about some of them, and at the end of that interview, I was like, "So guys, this is my company, Lynnvander Studios. We make licensed property board games. What do you think about making a board game adaptation of your Snapships toy line?" And they said, "Well, it's really funny you mentioned that, because our original concept was to make a what you see is what you get tabletop board game out of this thing, but we got so involved with all of the details of getting the toy done that we just kind of had to shelve the game idea for a while." But then, like, I came along to have exactly the background of like game design. They're like, "Oh, we want to make a game that's kind of a little bit like X-Wing." Oh, this guy's done a bunch of stuff with X-Wing. He's done Star Trek Alliance flight path stuff. He's done all of these amazing custom models. He's like, "You might be the perfect guy to design the game." So it was no stretch to like offer me the job. Fast forward about a year, and we put it on Kickstarter. So it is a totally constructible, customizable, buildable spaceship battle game. You can play it head to head, but you can also play it solo or co-op, because every single unit has an AI deck to run it.
Okay. So even regardless of what parts you put in there, would the AI deck just revolve around the...
Well, the AI decks use the preset ship designs, but you can tweak them, yeah.
All right. But
a big part of the game is like literally your ship is, you choose sort of the base frame of it, and then you get to put 6 cards worth of special abilities, which are specific pieces. So literally the model you build and the cards that it uses in the game are interlinked, right?
Right. That's what I remember. It's like,
I wanted to have different thrusters. I'm going to swap the physical thrusters on the model and get the other card. And now it doesn't turn as well, but goes faster in a straight line and that sort of stuff.
And this is you mentioned, so the X-Wing, so mechanically we should expect more like dogfighting style.
A little bit. It's I don't think there's really anything out there that's like it, because it uses, and you'll see this on the Kickstarter page. Every ship, you plug these little cards into a little plastic console, and you play this little mini. Someone else described this to me as designing your own mini Euro game to play, because your ship has a certain number of power cubes that you allocate every turn to do things. So you step through your turn by like, oh, I spend some power to move, then I spend some power to shoot. But you can only recover a certain number of those cubes at the end of or at the start of your next turn. So you have this sort of like push and pull of like, how much do I commit now versus how much do I want to be able to respond with later? It's got a very kind of Eurogame almost economy to it, but it does the tabletop presence looks like a dogfighting game.
Right.
It's got terrain, it's got freeform movement with rulers. It's kind of a really interesting marriage of the two.
I mean, it's been a while since I played X-Wing, I'll admit, but I'm pretty sure like a resource management adds that extra layer, and then also that works well, I'm assuming, because you can customize your ship so well. So like if you play a game and you're like, at least I'm thinking how I played, TCGs and stuff, you're like, oh, I'm
Mhm.
way too resource hungry.
Yep.
I really need some lighter parts to put in there. I think I can.
Yep. Or a secondary reactor or an exhaust port to deal with the heat buildup. All of these things, right? So there's a whole yeah. If you've played collectible card games or any of that kind of games of that style, this is very much a miniatures game that leverages some of that. It has a very tightly tuned sort of power and heat cube economy ecosystem that kind of runs the tabletop battle.
All right.
And of course, because all the individual bits are modular, you can totally be like, oh, I played that, the 1v1 duel that we just mashed out in like 30 minutes. Oh, well, I didn't really like my ship. I think it needs to be a little more maneuverable. Okay, I'm going to swap the wings for these wings. And oh, I didn't really like my short range gun. I'm going to put a longer range gun on it. Swap the model, swap the parts, then we're put it back on the table and go again, right?
Going to the Kickstarter, I remember the core video. The video shows two main ships that you mess around. Are there different factions, and can you mix with factions, or is it like this? If you want to play with this group, you only have access to these tools or something?
So yeah, we specifically designed two factions to be asymmetrical. The Forge, which are like your human and good aligned alien faction. And then we've got the Complex, who are like an evil alien hive mind taking over the galaxy. They each play very differently. Forge is a little bit slower, a little tankier, lots of missiles. Complex are a little more maneuverable, and they have some bladed wings and some various other sort of melee parts, like their ships can do ramming and all kinds of interesting stuff like that. So they are totally asymmetrical by intent. Mechanically, you can mix and match them, but I can tell you from playtest data that that's extremely broken. And we'd rather have it that way and let people do fun things on their own than trying to design all of it to be totally interoperable between the two factions. I think it's just, you get a different feel depending on which one you play.
That is true, and I imagine that if assuming this does very well and continues to grow, that would be the kind of thing like different formats, like this is the all-in format, this is the locked-in, and I guess is going to be my next question. Do you see this becoming the kind of game like X-Wing or TCGs where there would be a tournament scene where there will be legalities and where you're going to have to maybe look back at your game and be like, all right, this card was way too pushed. We put way too much efficiency. And then my question is going to be, how will you balance that?
It's a big challenge for sure. We've talked about organized play, and I think it's not entirely clear yet how we're going to roll it out, but we have some pretty clear ideas about what the formats are. We'll support what I like to call the 1v1 duel format, which is two players, one head-to-head, one ship each that they've custom built. But for me, where it really shines is playing what we would call a 12-point game, which is like 3 medium-sized ships on each team, and designing 3 ships from scratch to work together as kind of a cohesive unit, rather than just one ship that does one thing well, maybe. So those are kind of the two formats we're looking at. In terms of designing and balancing things for competitive play, we've been showing this game at conventions for a little under a year. Actually, Gen Con will be a year. The first con we did was Gen Con 2021, so it'll be a year next week of doing. We did all the PAXs. We did Origins as well this year. So it'll be, we've done quite a lot of public testing on it. We also have a pretty decent sized Discord of people who have been playing the game and just hammering away at it. So I'm feeling pretty good about where the game is overall from a sort of tightly tuned competitive scene. And we've seen a few builds that have kind of started to emerge as being like, oh yeah, that's probably the archetype on the first wave release.
I mean, I think that's inevitable. You usually can't avoid the meta.
There will definitely be a meta. I have some inkling of what it will be already at the stage, just from all the playtesting and development we've done. It's also worth mentioning that there are 22 existing Snapships kits that are already available in retail. We chose 6 of them to adapt to the tabletop game at launch, and that's already a ton of cards.
If I own those, they can already come in, like, or are they actually okay? So if you already are a Snapship,
so those 6 those 6 are supported at the initial wave of the game. All you need would be a starter set for tactics, and then you would need the card packs to get all the various cards that tell you what they can do.
Oh, so this will be designed. I just assumed it's the technical own beast, but the toys will intertwine, I guess. The toy line.
absolutely. Honestly, like I would love to be able to support every kit that currently exists in the tabletop game,
I mean, that just means possible future
given enough of a
expansions.
lead time. Yeah. Oh, yeah. And there's some stuff as well that we've talked about. Like, we're doing ships now, but the system just as easily handles ground units. Like it's.
I mean,
kind of rules
customizability does
agnostic.
not just need flight, but at that point, then you're going to be inviting everyone to want to build their Star Fox land tanks.
Well, one of the kits actually looks a little bit like a Landmaster. It's called the Scythe.
I haven't seen that one, so
Yeah, and there's also there's a biped mech called Maul as well.
oh god,
So
there
are kits already that are ground units. Given some time,
Yeah.
they'll be in the tabletop game.
Now I need to think, because I think wasn't there a living toy video game that had ship customization and that literally had a Star
Battle
Fox
for Starlink.
Yeah.
Maybe?
Though
A little bit.
I don't remember that one doing as well, but I imagine there's something different with I don't know if you guys looked at this, but the video game versus tabletop, because like I feel most tabletop people are much more happy to collect their miniatures, be it the X-Wing, Warhammer, and understand the balance there. But I don't know if it's the same thing versus those who in the video game area with Amiibos, the Disney Infinities and stuff.
Yeah, I mean, well, from my perspective, game aside,
Mm-hmm.
like the kits are amazing. They're super fun to build with. They are in a lot of ways more accessible than Lego because they're bigger and chunkier, and sort of the pieces are more detailed and more specific about what they are. I find like I've got both. I have a ton of Lego. I've built a ton of big Lego stuff, big spaceships I used to display at conventions and stuff. For me, Snapships is awesome because it is so easy to get started and so robust to be like, well, I don't like how the middle of that ship looks. Let me pop the two wings off or those two sub-assemblies off. Just totally switch up all the cores inside and pop the wings back on. Whereas in Lego, I almost have to smash the ship, take apart all the layers of stacked bricks,
Okay, yeah.
swap them around, and then put it all back together, right? Like Lego is a very unforgiving creative medium in some ways because things get trapped inside your model.
Right, that's
like,
when you accidentally use one brick that's supposed to be for outside than inside, and then you got to find
yeah,
it.
or just like this is too long and I didn't leave room to plug this in later. Like that kind of happens with Lego all the time. Snapships, all of it's very accessible. Like the pieces, because they're so big and chunky, it's very easy to almost completely iterate and change a model very quickly. I kind of compare it to like, if Lego is like working with an oil painting and waiting for it to dry, Snapships is like sketching with a pencil, and the end result is like pretty awesome because you've got all these sort of pre-made pieces that are wings and cockpits and guns and stuff.
How long would you say setup time is? Because I know that's one of actually there are many hurdles always with everything. But like when I bring a game, an LCG game, like Netrunner, I know for some people their biggest fear isn't playing the game and the difficulty there. It's the pre-game building. So, but I imagine it's a lot easier to build the ship with, you said around 6 pieces, I believe. Versus
there are 6 part cards per ship. Yeah, the actual physical ship kit for one of those medium ships is about 40 pieces.
Okay, I mean, wide selection, but you don't need to. And I assume there's a suggested build with.
Yeah, so every ship has a chassis card. It's this sort of square card that has a default. It's got the stats and an image of the sort of preset ship on the front, and on the back it's got the cube layout of the preset and then a recommended list of part cards for it. So if you actually don't want to build anything that doesn't come out of a kit with instructions, you can do that. You can put that on the table and play that ship basically as it exists. And then if you're feeling a little bit more adventurous than that, it's not much of a leap from there to take the 2 or 3 ships of the same faction you've got and swap the wings and see how that changes things, or swap the guns, right? Because most of them mount in the similar orientation into similar places. So you can kind of go as deep down the building and customization rabbit hole as you want. But we made sure that we had all the preset stuff in there for people who are used to, or just want to play something kind of easy, like give me the instructions, I'll build the model, put on the table, play the game.
Now, before we go, I gotta ask this: do you have a favorite ship? Not like even strong, just one that you think you enjoy piloting.
Are we talking specifically in Snapships?
Yes,
or are we talking
specifically Snapships? Sorry.
That's a tough one. I think there are a bunch that I really like. My favorite is probably the Lance on the Forge side. The nearest similar sort of feeling ship would be like an A-wing. It's very fast. It's very light. It can cover most of the map if you decide to spend your power doing that on a given turn. But you put some upsized guns on it, and it can be a surprisingly good little assassin. Fly around the back flank, swoop in, get a kill where you're not expecting it. Yeah, that's probably my most favorite one to play. But there are so many really interesting designs you can make because you have the full modularity.
Right. It's hard.
You want to build a ship that's all missile pods? Go for it.
I just want to blow up everything that I can see.
Yeah.
That's all I'm asking.
Oh, yeah.
Well,
that's right.
Thank you so much for joining me. Unfortunately, I cannot suggest for all of you to join you during the live stream because it will be over by the time you're watching this interview. But like you said, you'll be at Gen Con, correct? And this video will be going out before then. So if you're heading there, go say hi and check out the games.
I'm in the expo hall in the Lynnvander Studios area. We're running Snapships demos like Thursday to Sunday, 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. Like it's solid Snapships demos for me this Gen Con. So
fantastic. And you'll have those other games you showed there, right?
Yeah, so we'll have Gemini Gauntlet will be for sale in our booth. We're in booth 3015, right in the far corner of the hall. But that's a good one too to check out.
Awesome. And if you happen to be watching this after Gen Con, though, where can they find you so they can keep up to date with all this stuff?
Absolutely. So you can follow along about Snapships Tactics, which is actually snapshipstactics.com. That's kind of our hub. There's also a fan-made Discord server for Snapships, which is now also got tactics content. You can find a link to that on the Snapships website. For me personally, I'm Lynnvander Studios, so you can find us at lynnvander.rocks on the web. That's our company site. And you can find us in lots of different publishers' catalogs as well. We've worked on a game for, 15 different publishers at this stage. We've done a little bit of everything.
Well, thank you so much again for joining and telling me about your design process and all those games. And thank you, everyone, for joining us to listen. But for now, I'm Will, and this has been Roll for Crit.